So now we're almost at the end of our 100-year timeline of drumming and drum set evolution. And we're going to focus on the year 1964, because at this point, rock and roll has actually been around now for about 10 years, and the drum set, as we know it, is really come together. The blueprint for it is the blueprint of the drum set that we still use today. In other words, all the elements are now in place. We've got kick, snare, we got a hi-hat, we got a ride cymbal, we got a crash cymbal, we got toms that go from high to low, and the way a drummer plays in a popular music situation is very similar to how we would play today if we sit down, based kind of on a boom, plap, boom, boom, plap kind of a deal, right? And we've got straight eighth grooves, we got backbeats, so all this stuff is coming together. And I like to wrap things up in our 100-year journey by talking about the years 1964-65, because something very particular happened during these years, and there was one more big sea change that was going to happen for all drummers that was going to affect all of us. And of course, 1964 is the year of the British invasion. So, starting with the Beatles, you have a lot of bands, the Beatles, the Stones, the Yardbirds, and later on bands like The Who and Cream and Deep Purple, all the way through the end of the 60s, just this onslaught of amazing British bands that actually had been reared on American rock and roll and blues and rockabilly and soul music, and they took their version of that and created a new brand of rock and roll and brought it back to America. They invaded America. So 1964 is the year of the British invasion. And one of the key pieces of that happening was the Beatles appearing on the Ed Sullivan Show. So of course at this point, television, everybody's got a TV in their home by now, and the Ed Sullivan Show was sort of like America's Got Talent, or one of these shows that's a showcase for people to show off a lot of different kinds of talents, not just singing and dancing. They had plate jugglers and animal acts and all kinds of stuff. But they also had, musical acts. So the Beatles appear on the Ed Sullivan Show. And at the same time as you have the Beatles appearing, the audience that's watching is a new generation of American teenagers called the baby boom generation that were all born right after the end of World War II. And now they're teenagers and they're looking for something to identify with, right? So the Beatles come on, and it's just a phenomenon. You have a phenomenon called Beatlemania. America was crazy for the Beatles and crazy for these British mop-top youths, right? And so you have a whole generation of drummers intently watching this show on the Ed Sullivan Show. And you didn't have that many television channels at that time, so some crazy number of people were actually watching. Something like 45% of all the TVs in America were tuned into this one program. So you had just the entire country riveted. And what did they see? They saw Ringo playing with the match grip. The match grip, okay? And this, again, we don't think too much of it today. You go to your lesson when you're a young drummer, and generally the first grip you learn is the match grip. But prior to this time, in the 1960s and earlier, most drummers learned the traditional grip. And I'm a lefty, so I play like this, but most righty drummers, typical drummers, will play like this, okay? This is our traditional grip. And this, of course, goes back to the days of marching, because you had a snare drum that came down when you would march, and that had a lean so you could walk with the drum. So you had to create a grip where you could have a rotational motion so you didn't have to play like this, with your arms. You could march comfortably with the drum being at a slant. So when the drum set evolved, drummers just left their snare drum at a slant, and that's how most drummers played, was this traditional grip. Now, occasionally, if there was a big solo happening or you were going to hit really hard, drummers would switch over and you'd see some match grip, but it was not the default grip. Well, guess what? By the time you get to Beatlemania, the Beatles were the very first band ever to play a rock concert in a stadium. They played at Shea Stadium, 1965, for 55,000 people. And this was totally new. This was not something that you would see every day, to see a band of any kind, let alone a rock and roll band, playing in a stadium full of people. Well, of course, technology wasn't what it is today. And you had very small PA systems, very small instruments. Ringo started using with a 20-inch bass drum. So in order to get that power that he needed to reach so many people, and of course he had screaming girls, nobody could hear anything because the screams were so deafening, Ringo opted to use the matched grip, so he could really hit hard. And he developed this cool style, you know, on the hi-hat, kind of buttering his bread, as it were. And he just laid it down, and it looked super cool. So guess what? A whole generation, this baby boom generation of young drummers looked at Ringo and said, I want to be that guy. I want to be in a band like that guy. I want to buy Ludwig drums like he's playing. So overnight, Ludwig again. Remember Ludwig going back to 1909, we talked about them? Now, suddenly in the 1960s, they're the most popular drum company on the planet. They had to keep their factory open 3 shifts a day in order to make enough drums to satisfy the demand, right? And of course, all these young drummers, they want to play rock and roll, and what do they want to do? They play the match grip. So almost overnight, the match grip becomes the default grip for drummers, and that still is the case today. Most of us, when we start playing drums, we play the match grip.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles!
Oh yeah, tell me something. I think you'll understand when I say that something. I wanna hold your hand.
Who can tell me what made a drum set a drum set?
The low boy.
Kick pedal. Match grip.
The sock cymbal.
My name is Daniel Glass. I'm a drummer, author, and educator. In 1994, I joined a band called Royal Crown Revue. We were trying to figure out how to take the rebellious spirit of modern styles like punk and put it into big band and other roots music. We found out it was already there. I've been absorbed in this world ever since. I started researching the evolution of the drum set and the way that we play it. In the last dozen years, I've interviewed more than 60 different legendary drummers. I came to a startling conclusion. Perhaps more than any other instrument, the drum set is equipped to tell the story of America and American music.
All of these immigrants coming from around the world brought their technology. Jazz music and pop music were one and the same. You could dance to it.